In the small, remote village of Velinova, nestled deep within the Carpathian Mountains, legends whispered through the darkened forests. They spoke of creatures that prowled the night, shadows that took human form, and the cursed souls condemned to roam eternally. The most terrifying of these legends was that of the vampire, a creature of unspeakable evil that fed on the lifeblood of the living. These legends warned of the many ways one could become such a monster, and among them, the birth of a child in a Caul was the most feared. On a stormy night in the late 18th century, when the wind howled through the trees and the rain beat mercilessly against the windows, a woman named Anya was about to give birth. The village midwife, a superstitious woman named Marta, had seen many births but had never encountered what she would see that night. Anya's labor was long and painful, and as the hours dragged on, the storm outside grew more intense. Thunder boomed and lightning flashed, illuminating the tiny room in the flickering light of a single candle. As the baby finally emerged, Marta's eyes widened in horror. The child was born in a Caul, a thin, translucent membrane that covered its entire body like a shroud. Superstition held that such a birth was an omen of great power and, more ominously, a sign of the unholy. Despite her fear, Marta carefully removed the Caul and handed the child to Anya. The baby boy was beautiful, with bright blue eyes and a shock of black hair, but something was unsettling about him. His gaze was too piercing, too knowing for a newborn. Whispers spread through Velinova like wildfire. The villagers, already wary of the supernatural, began to shun Anya and her child. They believed the boy, named Victor, was cursed, a future vampire. Anya, a devout woman, refused to accept this. She raised Victor with love and care, sheltering him from the villagers' suspicions. As Victor grew, his strangeness became more apparent. He rarely cried as an infant and seemed to understand things far beyond his years. By the time he was a teenager, his physical beauty had only intensified, but so had the villagers' fear. Animals avoided him, and he never seemed to eat or drink like other children. Anya, blinded by motherly love, dismissed these signs. One winter evening, an elderly man named Boris, a village elder, went missing. His body was found days later, drained of blood with 2 puncture wounds on his neck. Panic gripped Velinova. The villagers were convinced that a vampire was among them. Their thoughts immediately turned to Victor. Despite the mounting evidence, Anya defended her son fiercely. She pleaded with the villagers, reminding them of the lack of proof. Yet, in their terror, the villagers sought the guidance of Father Petrov, the village priest, who was well versed in the lore of vampires and other dark creatures. Father Petrov conducted an exorcism on Victor, an attempt to cleanse him of any unholy influence. However, during the ritual, Victor's eyes turned black, and he let out an otherworldly scream that chilled the bones of everyone present. It was as if the darkness within him had finally revealed itself. That night, Anya disappeared. Some claimed they saw her leaving the village with Victor, heading towards the ancient ruins of a monastery high in the mountains, a place long abandoned and rumored to be cursed. Others whispered that Victor had taken her against her will, that the transformation was complete, and he had become the vampire they feared. Velinova descended into chaos. The once peaceful village was now a place of suspicion and fear. Each night, the villagers locked their doors and windows, hanging garlic and crucifixes to ward off the evil they believed lurked in the shadows. Yet, people continued to disappear. Livestock were found drained of blood, and the howling of wolves echoed through the night, a reminder of the ancient curse that had befallen them. One fateful night, a group of brave villagers, armed with torches and stakes, decided to confront the evil head-on. They trekked up the mountain to the ruined monastery, their breaths visible in the cold, crisp air. The moon hung low and ominous in the sky, casting eerie shadows on the ground. As they approached the crumbling structure, they saw a figure standing in the entrance, cloaked in darkness. It was Victor. His once blue eyes were now a deep, blood red, and his skin, pale and lifeless, contrasted sharply with his dark hair. Anya was nowhere to be seen. "Leave this place," Victor's voice echoed, carrying in a natural resonance. "I am no longer the child you knew. The curse has taken hold, and there is no redemption for me." The villagers, gripped by a mixture of fear and determination, stepped forward. Father Petrov led the way, holding a crucifix aloft. "Victor, if there is any humanity left in you, let us help you. Let us end this nightmare." Victor's laugh was cold and hollow. Humanity, I have none left. But you, father, should know that evil is not so easily vanquished. It lives in the hearts of men, waiting for the right moment to emerge. Before the villagers could react, Victor vanished into the shadows, his form dissolving like mist in the moonlight. They searched the monastery, but there was no sign of him or Anya. The ruins were empty, save for the whispers of the wind and the lingering sense of dread. Days turned into weeks, and the disappearances in Velinova ceased. The villagers hoped that Victor had left for good, but the fear never truly subsided. They knew that somewhere, in the dark recesses of the Carpathian Mountains, the vampire still lurked, waiting for the right moment to return. Years passed, and the legend of Victor, the cursed child of Velinova, became a cautionary tale told to frighten children and warn against the dangers of superstition. Yet, those who had faced him knew that the story was far from over. The true terror lay in the knowledge that one day, Victor would return, bringing with him an ancient darkness that could never be fully extinguished. And so, Velinova waited, living in the shadow of the vampire's curse, knowing that the nightmare was not yet finished and that the final chapter of their story was still to be written. The story of Victor, the cursed child of Velinova, did not end with his disappearance. For decades, the villagers lived in a fragile peace, their lives overshadowed by the ever-present fear of his return. The ruined monastery stood as a grim reminder of the darkness that had once threatened their existence. Yet, life in Velinova went on, albeit with a cautious eye towards the encroaching shadows. Generations came and went, and the tale of Victor became a chilling legend, told in hushed tones by the village elders around crackling hearth fires. Despite the passing of time, the villagers maintained their rituals, hanging garlic at their doors and windows and carrying crucifixes for protection. The fear, though dormant, never fully dissipated. One winter's night, nearly 50 years after Victor's disappearance, the thick fog rolled into Velinova. It was unlike any the villagers had seen before. Dense and heavy, it seemed almost alive, curling around the buildings and muffling the sounds of the night. The animals grew restless, their uneasy cries adding to the palpable tension. A young woman named Katerina, a descendant of Anya, felt an inexplicable pull towards the old monastery. She had grown up hearing the stories of her ancestor and the cursed child, but something within her refused to believe that Victor was truly lost to darkness. She had often wondered what had become of her great-great-grandmother, Anya, and the mysterious circumstances surrounding her disappearance. That night, driven by a mixture of curiosity and an uncheckable sense of destiny, Katerina decided to venture to the monastery. She wrapped herself in a heavy cloak, took a lantern, and set off towards the mountains. The fog seemed to part for her as she walked, guiding her steps towards the ancient ruins. The monastery loomed ahead, its crumbling walls barely visible through the swirling mist. As she approached, Katerina felt a chill that was not just from the cold air. It was as if the very stones of the place were imbued with an ancient, malevolent presence. She steeled herself and stepped inside. The interior of the monastery was silent, the air thick with the weight of forgotten memories. Katerina's lantern cast flickering shadows on the walls, and she moved cautiously, her heart pounding in her chest. As she explored the ruins, she came across an old, dusty book lying on a stone altar. The cover was worn and faded, but she could just make out the title, *The Chronicles of the Damned*. Curiosity piqued, Katerina opened the book. Its pages were filled with writings in an ancient script, but as she turned them, she found a passage in a language she could understand. It spoke of a ritual, a means to bind a vampire to a place, and a way to summon the creature once more. Her breath caught in her throat as she realized that this book might hold the key to Victor's fate. Katerina continued reading, her eyes widening with each word. The ritual required a blood sacrifice, a relic of the vampire's past, and a willing participant. It dawned on her that the villagers might have used this very ritual to bind Victor to the monastery all those years ago, hoping to contain the evil within its walls. Determined to uncover the truth, Katerina delved deeper into the ruins, searching for any sign of her ancestor. In a hidden chamber, she found what she had been looking for: Anya's journal, preserved in a wooden chest, its pages yellowed with age. Katerina's hands trembled as she opened it and began to read. The journal detailed Anya's life after Victor's birth, her struggle to protect him, and her heartbreak at the villagers' accusations. The final entries were the most revealing. Anya had written of Victor's transformation, her desperate attempt to save him, and the ritual that had ultimately bound him to the monastery. But there was more. Anya had willingly joined Victor in his exile, hoping that her love could somehow reach the humanity within him. As Katerina read the last entry, she felt a presence behind her. Turning slowly, she found herself face to face with Victor. His appearance had changed a little, his eyes still held that unsettling, piercing gaze, but there was something different about him now, a depth of sorrow and longing that had not been there before. "Who are you?" Victor's voice was a soft, echoing whisper. "I am Katerina," she replied, her voice steady despite the fear that gripped her. "Anya was my great-great-grandmother." Victor's eyes softened slightly at the mention of Anya. "She stayed with me," he said quietly, "until the end." Katerina took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "Is she still here?" Victor shook his head. "No, she passed away many years ago, but her spirit lingers, watching over me. She believed I could be redeemed." "And can you?" Katerina asked, taking a step closer. Victor's expression darkened. "I don't know. The curse is strong, and the darkness within me is powerful, but there is a way to break it, a way to end this torment." Katerina's heart raced. "Tell me how." "I'll help you." Victor hesitated, then spoke slowly. "The ritual that bound me here can be reversed, but it requires a willing sacrifice. Someone must offer their blood freely, and the relic must be destroyed. Only then can the curse be lifted." Katerina's mind whirled with the implications. The willing sacrifice, the person who offered their blood would not survive the ritual. It was a heavy price to pay, but she felt an overwhelming sense of duty to her ancestor and to Victor. "I'll do it," she said firmly. "If it means freeing you and ending this curse, I'll do it." Victor's eyes widened in surprise. "You don't know what you're offering. This path is fraught with danger and pain." "I understand," Katerina replied, "but I believe in my ancestors' love for you. If she thought you could be saved, then so do I." Victor nodded slowly, respect and a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "Very well. We must prepare for the ritual. It must be done at the stroke of midnight, under the full moon." As they made their preparations, Katerina couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The monastery seemed to hum with an ancient energy, as if the very walls were alive and aware of what was to come. Midnight approached, and the full moon cast an eerie glow over the ruins. Katerina and Victor stood at the altar, the old book opened before them, the necessary items laid out, a silver dagger, a vial of holy water, and a pendant that had belonged to Anya. Katerina took the dagger and made a small cut on her palm, letting her blood drip onto the pendant. The air grew thick with a sense of anticipation, the shadows around them deepening. "Now, destroy the pendant," Victor instructed, his voice tense with urgency. With a steady hand, Katerina smashed the pendant against the altar, the pieces scattering across the stone surface. A blinding light erupted from the shattered relic, and Victor let out a cry of pain, his body convulsing as the curse began to lift. But just as quickly, the light dimmed, and an unnatural darkness descended upon them. Katerina felt a cold hand grasp her shoulder, and she turned to see a figure emerging from the shadows. It was Anya, or rather, what was left of her, a ghostly, spectral form, her eyes filled with sorrow and determination. "Anya," Victor whispered, his voice breaking. "I am here, my love," Anya's spirit replied. "I have watched over you all these years, waiting for this moment." Anya reached out, her ghostly hand merging with Katerina's. "Together, we can end this. Katerina, you must be strong." Katerina nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'm ready." The final moments of the ritual were a blur of light and darkness, pain and relief. Katerina felt her strength ebbing away as the curse was drawn from Victor, his form shimmering with a newfound vitality. Anya's spirit guided them, her presence a comforting force amidst the chaos. As the ritual concluded, Victor collapsed, breathing heavily but alive. The darkness that had once consumed him was gone, replaced by a sense of peace. Katerina, though weakened, felt a deep satisfaction knowing that she had played a part in ending the curse. Anya's spirit lingered for a moment, her gaze fixed on Victor. "Live, my love. Live for both of us." With those final words, Anya's spirit faded, leaving Victor and Katerina alone in the now silent monastery. The fog began to lift, and the first rays of dawn broke through the darkness. Victor turned to Katerina, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," he said simply. You have given me a second chance. Katerina smiled weakly. It was worth it. But even as they savored their victory, a nagging sense of unease remained. For deep in the shadows of the Carpathian Mountains, an ancient evil stirred, awakened by the disruption of the ritual. The curse that had plagued Victor was but a fragment of a greater darkness, one that now sought a new vessel. And so, the story of Velinova was far from over. The village, once again, found itself on the brink of a new nightmare, as the true source of the curse prepared to reveal itself. The final chapter of their tale had yet to be written, and the true battle against the darkness was only. Katerina and Victor stood in the ruins of the monastery, the first light of dawn casting long shadows through the crumbling walls. The air was crisp and filled with the promise of a new day. The weight of the past seemed to lift, and for the first time in half a century, Victor felt the warmth of hope. But there was still an unease in the air, a lingering sense of an ancient evil that had not yet been fully vanquished. "We need to return to the village," Katerina said, her voice tired but determined. "They need to know what we've done." Victor nodded, his newfound vitality evident in his movements. "Yes, and we must prepare for what is to come. The true source of the curse is still out there." As they made their way back to Velinova, the fog continued to lift, revealing the beauty of the Carpathian landscape. The villagers, seeing them approach, emerged cautiously from their homes. There was a mix of curiosity and fear in their eyes, but also a glimmer of hope. Father Petrov, now an elderly man, but still the village's spiritual guide, stepped forward. "Katerina, Victor, what news do you bring?" Katerina recounted the events of the night, how they had lifted the curse from Victor and encountered the spirit of Anya. The villagers listened in awe, their fear slowly giving way to a tentative belief that the nightmare might finally be over. "But," Katerina continued, her voice grave, "the true source of the curse, an ancient evil, has been awakened. We must prepare ourselves for its arrival." Father Petrov nodded, his face stern. "We will face it together, as a community. We have overcome much, and with faith and unity, we can overcome this as well." The villagers set to work immediately, reinforcing their homes, gathering supplies, and preparing for the battle they knew was coming. Katerina and Victor, along with Father Petrov, devised a plan to confront the ancient evil. They knew they had to draw it out and defeat it once and for all. Days passed, and the tension in the village grew. The nights were especially harrowing, with every sound and shadow carrying the weight of impending doom. But the villagers held strong, their resolve bolstered by the knowledge that they had already achieved what once seemed impossible. On the seventh night, as the full moon rose high in the sky, the ancient evil finally revealed itself. A darkness unlike any other descended upon Velinova, and from its depths emerged a creature of pure malevolence. It was a towering figure, with eyes that burned like embers and a presence that exuded malice. The villagers gathered in the central square, armed with weapons and protected by talismans. Katerina, Victor, and Father Petrov stood at the forefront, ready to face the creature. The ancient evil laughed, a sound that echoed through the mountains and chilled the blood of all who heard it. "You think you can defeat me?" it taunted. "I am eternal. I am the darkness that lives in the hearts of men." "We have faced darkness before," Victor replied, his voice strong, "and we have overcome it. You will not find victory here." The battle that ensued was fierce and brutal. The villagers fought with all their might, their unity and courage a testament to their strength. Father Petrov invoked ancient prayers, his faith a shield against the creature's malevolence. Victor, now free of his curse, fought with a ferocity born of years of suffering and a deep desire for redemption. Katerina, wielding the silver dagger that had once been used in the ritual, faced the creature head-on. She felt the spirit of Anya guiding her, her ancestors' love and determination fueling her every move. With a final, powerful thrust, she drove the dagger into the heart of the ancient evil. The creature let out a roar of agony, its form disintegrating into a swirl of shadows and ash. The darkness that had enveloped the village dissipated, and a brilliant light filled the square. The villagers shielded their eyes, and when the light faded, the ancient evil was gone. Exhausted but victorious, the villagers rejoiced. They had faced their greatest fear and emerged triumphant. Katerina and Victor stood together, their bond forged in the crucible of battle and strengthened by their shared purpose. Father Petrov approached them, his eyes filled with pride. "You have done what many thought impossible. The curse is broken, and the ancient evil is vanquished. Velinova is free. The village celebrated their hard-won victory, the air filled with laughter and relief. Life slowly returned to normal, but with a renewed sense of community and strength. The old fears were laid to rest, and the villagers embraced the future with hope. Katerina and Victor became beloved figures in Velinova, their story a testament to the power of love, courage, and redemption. They worked together to rebuild the village and ensure that the legacy of the past would never be forgotten. As the years passed, Velinova flourished, its people thriving in the shadow of the Carpathian Mountains. The tale of Victor and Katerina was passed down through generations, a story of triumph over darkness and the enduring power of the human spirit. And so, the story of Velinova found its good ending, the final chapter written in the hearts of those who had fought and won. The village, once haunted by the shadows of the past, now basked in the light of a brighter future, forever free from the curse that had once threatened to consume them all.